Lamrim Le Tambo Chima, Lamria, Lobsang Dorje, Chidi Kapla, Tambo, and the Givo Chuma Lamrim Bati, the Knitting Lamrim Bati, the Givo Chimba Lamrim Balachigores, the Netigo Biki Kimten, which that Delia, and Mati Antiba, Govi Kova the Kimten, the Nit in the Yore Mason, and the two at the Zawa and the Lamrim Chambodi and Lamrim Digo Zawa Lamdringi, Convertigo, and the Lamdrin Nalet in the Son Yore. And the Mazi and that Chike Dotanga, and the Chikombuluta, and the Papa Tomena, Loba Edevala Sopatin, Journal Sun said that the Gimtana Javatica Dushine as the tissue Savache.
So this morning we concluded looking at the chapter on the paths of the three types of persons, where we saw that for a beginner, someone who's yet to cultivate fully fledged qualities of the path, then it's imperative that they train first in establishing in the preliminaries, establishing the foundation to engage in the Mahayana by training in the practices which are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, and then based on that, engaging in the trainings which are shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, and then with those preliminaries well cultivated, ideally suited to engage in the trainings that are unique to practitioners of great capacity. And we've looked at reasons establishing why this is the case, and then the sources from which this presentation is drawn, so that we can recognize that this is an authentic, a genuine presentation. And those sources include Buddha Shakyamuni himself, so from Sutra, as well as Nagarjuna and Sangha and Aryadeva. And the very foundational source text of this Lamrim tradition is from Atisha, Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment.
Nyamlen che rimbachi ta dang tu ne lamrin du sima chi rimbe de chi san da nga ga nyamlen kap le du de nga ga nyamlen ma ka sa de le ya nga ga nyamlen ko ma song du kap la ko na ne ten na dong ban yu kom na ten na ten ki ho kom na an de ya an chi che bu phui da da kom ja da de su zo chung go ma do da jam ni jo kom go ya da an ne chi ge ja ju sem kom go ya an ne chi ko wa le nge jung kom go ya di ge sung go ma de 이나 가사 코롱 냠는제 가사 코롱기 디수 삼던 거 군노디제 자주 셈다 디수 고발이 저되게 삼바 아니 예정다 디수 가사 냠는제 가사 코롱기 디 냠는제 삼던 거 군노 고고와 디가르스네 데디 코롱기 냠만마 직장에 냠뇨 여바디 진 코롱아 냠수 렘베캅라 가사 코롱 냠수 렘베캅라 디수 군노다 자주 셈다 아니 고발이야 심자대 고발을 되게 삼방에 중에 삼바다 전시 셈 잠니지라 소바디 그런 냠내 제로 그런 냠내 제고고를 와지고래 지금 마치 송비급라 나게 냠내 림바딘디급라 어다디 동반이고 되네고 제다 임비김전 되네레 세야당 아니 잠니죠 공고래 세야다 자주심 공고래서 전시심 아니 잠니제 심자 함제래 동아 자와다 디기레 대한바디 공고래서 디송고 마다가 나게 냠는 거라 가르 송고라서는데电比电工吧，电把哈工业、经过工业、东半球工业，电那呀，俺sem起来呀，那这些里呀，确送至于对接吧，接上都新的过送过车上的做啊。
So at the end of the chapter of the paths of the three types of persons, it's in the referring to Aryadeva, it refers to the contemplations of the Paramita Yana, and thereafter, in other words, the sutra practices or trainings of the Mahayana, and thereafter one follows from needs to engage progressively in the mantra yana. So the mantra yana or tantra is included within the Mahayana, and it includes a number of trainings which one needs to learn and engage in, such as the cultivation of the mandala, the how to make offerings in a specific way as presented in Tantra, and the various other meditations associated with secret mantra. What is not presented in this sequence of trainings is how to cultivate definite emergence through reflecting on the sufferings of the lower realms and the sufferings of the high realms, and thereby samsara in its entirety. This is not presented, nor is it presented how to cultivate love and compassion and how to cultivate bodhicitta. This too isn't presented, nor the various logical reasonings utilized in order to come to realize emptiness. This isn't presented. It is, and the reason it's not presented is because it is assumed that the practitioner has already well trained in this, successfully trained in these meditations, and therefore they are ready to be guided progressively through the stages of training in mantrayana. And these again include in the various other reflections or various other topics such as meditating on the mandala and so forth. Moreover, not only is it assumed that these meditations have already been successfully cultivated, but they are a prerequisite to actually engage in Tantra, in that one's motivation needs to be one of bodhicitta. And one needs to not only have a motivation of bodhicitta, but an understanding of emptiness too, an understanding of reality. So that is the motivation that one comes to the practices of Tantra with. And therefore, it's not explicitly presented in the various Tantras how to cultivate definite emergence, which is the prerequisite to cultivate bodhicitta, nor is it presented how to cultivate the wisdom realizing emptiness. All of this is assumed to already be present in the meditator's continuum through their prior training. And therefore, the stages of training in mantrayana are specific to mantrayana, but based on the perfection vehicle.
기부 징계 남지 중앙 남지림바 냠nen제 징계 남지림바 냠nen제 산에 근데 타바침비 기부 침비 남지림바 최된비 갑래 다데 강사들이야 타바침비 최 장주 셈다 장주 셈이 셈비 호네 진바다 수련 쇠바 근데 전제라서 바다 근데 동반이 도비기 예 동바 실라송도 죽다다 근데 동반이 도비기 로kom나 근데 지시한기 시한이야 편부다 근데가 송거마도다 어다 코발링에 좀 검다다 아니지게 나성의 동안에 드려지 않은 개와치만 먼저 거봐 돈이 듬바디게 장고를 되는 송거 말바다 태바침비 취대 그런 가사들라 태바침비 취 송도 갑라다 태바침비 장주심비 심비 돈의 진비 냠는 지역과 진비 되는 지역으로 진비 동심 되는 공고를 해야 하다 셔바 되는 공고를 해야 하다 누시는 마 누송을 마도 코발링에 좀 공고를 코비 윤되는 공고를 하는 가서를 탈되게 삼바제 땅원이 고가 토부스에 삼다 그 공고를 송고 마다가지 태바침비 취 송비 갑라 장주심다 장주심 그 공비 반에다 되는 진바도 수를 셔바 동바이 도비 셰라라서 냠는 제가 송고를 디가르스는 이제 태바침비 취 송을 갑라 디송고를 와다 얘나 가사 코롱기 냠는 집이 qabla kunnola 바로 그것은 안 셈제 탐지기도 산조고 봐 토발이야 아니 무티네 때 영원조고 봐 톱되기 되니 좀 봐야다 아니 코르비 동아 타달을 줘 봐 셈제 탐지 코르비 동아 타달을 줘야지 야 상이설로 거빈스 가사 코롱기 냠는 지고 삼다 고 냠는 지고로 태바 준비 취 송비 qabla 콜야디 송고에 막 콜 가선 차서 니서 하고 그러 와다 디리
So whilst from what's just then been presented, in the division of the Mahayana of the mantra teachings or the teachings of Tantra, there we see what is presented are the various stages of training to do with Tantra, because everything prior to that should have already been cultivated. Similarly, in terms of the other division of the Mahayana, the sutra teachings or the perfection vehicle, the Paramitayana, the actual presentations of the Mahayana start with the cultivation of, or the trainings to cultivate love, great compassion, and bodhicitta. Because it's already assumed the practitioner has already engaged in the trainings which are shared with the Mahayana. The trainings that are shared, which led to the generation of definite emergence. So all the prior trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial and intermediate capacity. These aren't the teachings. These aren't the teachings of the Mahayana. The teachings of the Mahayana are specifically those of training in the 6 perfections and cultivating bodhicitta and so forth. The teachings which are shared with them are assumed to have already been included, already been cultivated.
On the nation, you that you would drink lamia, rimbating a ducablena, and the cars was in them. That you would chew a lamirin by the dingo marvatis, coale at the cars of girl when you go on to go to the years, when no go about to each other, and Jimba the Susan Yamna was at this Mara Casota, Korea do not have a drogore, Chisan Korea, that comes from Jinyawa Ida Dundro, the net had I me, Ganeshina, Coale, Lenu, Omegawa Tamjela, and the Dumara Madayoma, which is a dead Dumar Tawore, Della Drew Tabla Carcosena, the Jimba the Susavala Socomiata, Didin, the Dame of the Sheracom, and think Dombanila Bipigi, Shila Sundo Comte Ducian, Yamna Jawars and Dinigi. Come down some gold, madam, and many Giachimo when you go on to which you know, and this is Congo, said Man Sungo Maro. Carsendi, give Chungi, tomorrow Lamirin Banyamin chest, Lap Tara Inza, what Sasa, the Dicola, Jang Lapuel Marwada, how go over. That in a Gaza Koronga in Yamlin Chibicabla, or that said Delet in Yamlin, Giachima in a when you go on Moody to get Delia, and the Yamlin Cobra who the tens of who you send me. The Gunodi, go over what
This is also the case with the practitioner, the trainings associated with the practitioner of intermediate capacity. There, the trainings in terms of how to reflect on the sufferings of the higher realms, giving rise to determination to gain freedom from samsara in its entirety, and then the trainings to engage in to bring that about, those of generosity, ethics, patience, choice, perseverance, and in particular concentration and wisdom. These are explicitly presented. What is not presented is how to train to gain a good rebirth, how to generate the motivation to achieve a good rebirth, because it is already assumed that the practitioner comes to these teachings with those qualities already cultivated, that the practitioner already comes with a determination that I have to turn away from the causes that would otherwise lead to falling into the lower realms, and I must attain the causes that lead to a high realm rebirth. That has already been trained in. So these are present in the motivation of the practitioner.
And the Turbo Pioneer, the Ma, she said, the near shoe. The near name to get Dicelia, Nicky Givation, Denso, Givation, that Givation, or Sonia, Givation, 10 years, and the danger Lumiki Cabaret in the Google said, that Givation, Denso Comnadi, the Ma, she said, and Dizela, and the danger you Lutin, the more soon, danger Lutin, Jeton Chawa, and Gia Chawa in Badi Ma, she, on those in them. Monzuki Shirwada de Jugulity or Dene and in Ma that Jeza Dusin Shudi that Dene and give us Milamirin Balatia de Liadusin said Nanzuki that Rimbal Mason to Erwa that you that come that some dying on the new that Tubig go be Gimsen and the Garsore. The nigger some diet, church, Kimson, Church, Payant to get some diet, to see some diet, ding on the years. Then they give you singing, singing the give you singing, then not do see but the ma shoes. Then they you Ludian said, don't chimbo than gay chimbo, but then Delia, Yamlan Chico, Kimson, the ma shoes. Then that you get that was Rimbatida to get in the Chivarish ma shoes. Then wonder to get. Jiza Denigi that she Chan, down under that, also that Yamlin Cheg, that you would chung to more Lambi Rimba, that come Japna, the rest also come Japna couple of marsh, that Wishi. Then Dinyele wondered to chair, that day you would that Lamia Ramimba, you would chung the two more Lambi Rimba way. Now, anything that two more Lambi Rimba way, then you would chimbo to more Lambi, give a chimbo Lambi Rimba share that I would give a chung the two more Lambi Rimba shadow. 다 고추고로 마다.
What we've covered in the last year and a half or so are the preliminaries to the actual teaching. So we've looked at the qualities of the author of the text, the qualities of the text or the teaching itself. We've then came to look at the qualities of the spiritual teacher, including the qualities of the student, so the qualities we require, as well as then how to rely on the spiritual teacher. Thereafter, we looked at the precious human rebirth, which constitutes these 8 freedoms and 10 endowments, came to recognize its rarity and its great value. Thereafter, we looked at the meditation sessions, or how to engage in meditation, and now we have just concluded looking at the paths of the 3 types of persons. So all of this brings about the introduction to the actual stages of training. And within this, we've covered 2 foundational meditation topics, those relating to the spiritual teacher and those relating to the precious human rebirth. So some experience would have been gained meditating there. So now the introduction is complete, and we come explicitly to the meditations, which are the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, later to be followed by those of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, followed by those of great capacity.
Niba skiwu chungwo dang tumowe lamji rinpa lo changwa dang jingdang tumowe lamji rinpa lo changwa dang kibu chimbe lamji rinpa lo changwa wa sachi sumchi dangbo sachi rinpa sumcha gerwa.
So the division of the chapters in our translations, I don't want to really say it's different from the Tibetan. The Tibetan's not so divided, but what we have is fine. So we'll be linking really now to the new part of the text. Ideally, this should be on the next page. The actual way of taking its essence. This has 3 points: training the mind in the stages of the path shared in common with persons of lesser capacity, training the mind in the stages of the path shared in common with persons of medium capacity, and training the mind in the stages of the path unique to persons of great capacity.
Sumche dangbola sumche jiza sumji karilana chungui samba chungwa ngwe sayda samba di gebi ki tseje ndela lodo sawa wo sayda.
So now in our English we come to the new chapter. So we've got the new handout, the 4th book. It starts on page 89. Or if you've got the published book, it's in chapter 8 on page something else, 79. Death and future lives, training the mind in the stages of the path shared in common with persons of lesser capacity. This is 3 points. First, the actual training in the attitude of persons of lesser capacity. Second, the measure of that attitude arising. This is only much later, page 148. And clearing up misconceptions about that.
Gibu chungwe samba chungwa ngwe sida gibu chungwe lamyi rinpa samba chaya dila ngwe chaya di che. Da samba di giwe tse se jangni da tse gane chile giwe da gibu chungwe lamyi rinpa gewa re sa tse pa. Dene chile samla dene shi kogwe na da gibu chimbe ki chungwe samba lo chungwe rinpa di gyule gewa re. Dene shi geme na le me na giwe ma re sa tse di sa re. Dela lodo sawa sida da dene ki jing di mendo asambe ke no tuerjin di mare se lodo ba meba di mare di ire se wo soya de ya lodo sawa sigro.
Looking here, this is 3 points. So this refers to the entirety of the training of a practitioner, an entirety of the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity has 3 major outlines. So the first is the actual training, which will start soon, which is the actual training shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. Then at the conclusion of that, it comes the measure of that attitude having arisen. So in the published book, it's much further on page 148. And this is the measure by which the practitioner themselves comes to identify whether they have concluded the training in a practitioner of initial capacity, whether they've given rise to that level of mental transformation. And that is then immediately followed by clearing up misconceptions. In other words, to ensure that there's no confusion, that the state of training, this level of training, has been achieved.
Delia Nambo and Junior Sambajo Kasori. Ngwe de la Carson that Delia Ni Shure. Jidin Chima, Danye, you look Yapas, and then Jidin Chimmer, David Thubten Rabten.
So we see that the trainings that are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity has 3 outlines. Now, the first outline has 2 subdivisions. The actual training, the attitude of person of lesser capacity, has 2 points. Generating an attitude of concern for future lives. So this concern it's usually a much stronger word, like striving for. The concern is fine, but it's quite a strong term. And relying on the methods for generating happiness in future lives.
That's it. Give you samba chong, samba jaya did it, that in the just that the Tambodilla, give you samba chong, west, samba jaya, some of the carriage higher did it, the dingy. Chidin Chima Dunya, you look your the Chidin Chima, Kiwa Chimon, Hadam, one do Kopanchi, Tokudu, Sembe Dunya is somebody. Dike, Chikria. Then, look, Yawasa. That Kiwa Chima, one go Dunya, you do by yes, that Kiwa Chima, one do Kopan, Toyagi, you tablam the carriers, and DJ Hore at the top, Chidin Chima, David Thubten Rabten, Chidin Chima, Hadam, me Kopan, one do Kopan, Toby, you tap the carrier, you the carriers, and DDS, one do come to you did one of go to be din delia, DQ, you did it, Dinyam and Jehore said this one. That Donala, just that somebody tried to give you two because Yamna J did it, I didn't need it. Look, Jayag, that Bezuche, Comia did it, didn't Chawore.
Looking just a little further at these 2 points, so still staying in the same place, the actual training and the attitude of persons of lesser capacity. So the first point, generating an attitude of concern for future lives. This is where we generate the attitude of, I have to gain a good rebirth in my future life. I cannot fall to the lower realms. I have to gain a good rebirth. So this is where we generate the deep desire, the yearning for the result. The second part is the cause, how to achieve that, relying on the methods for gaining happiness in future lives. So the first part of the training is to generate this yearning for a particular result. And the second part is then, with that yearning, powering the mind, focusing the mind, one strives to develop those causes.
Chimara Divi Thubten Rabten said, Jisan Kiwa Chima, one do go to Toyag, Tobu, Top Beauty Garrison, Nejutum, Tsudum Soya. Then, and then Delia, Kiwachima, one do go to Yudi, and then Nejutum, Tsudum Soya. One do go to be Den Tela, and the Longi, Twinking, Ganga, Machava, Ganga, Diadi, and the Jimbata. One but Sawala Soba, the Negi Gasore. Nuba the Tembayan Telia, Sevaniam Negia. That in Telaya, Chelia, Dunyaki Yamnesia, Kohoradi, Gasor, Zundu Comia. And Dela, and Chikiwachima, the Negi Yamnesia, Kohoraya, the Gide, Raege, Molam Jimaba, some Javas, that Jesa, the Tabdi, that Tabdi. Kunlo de la Carasana, that's some Jan, that's what the tongue that did him. Then he, and the Chigi, my Chigi. That been as a Tawachimi Yamlin Ching in that day, that's some gentamjig, the Sanyo Papa Togo, Tawachimi Church in Yamlin Chewood, that Denegin Yamlin Cheva, like Yawachima, that day, Gina, Yawachima in one do go on top share to be top Gudu, because one do go on 10 Delayanga, Yamlin Chetu, Guji Wudu, Chesa that, then Yashud one do go by, one do go on top Gudu, some Chesa one do go on Togo, turn your top dig, the nigger sometime, Yawachima, one do go on top dig, Dunya, Dumbaki. Dumbaki, that Dumbaki said, I want to go on top of the same Dumbaki ones, one do go on to be chilled you and Yajim Song. 다 원도 고번 토바지 이도 딘델야 안 집에네 제 가서래 튕게 마다와 강안에 최지야 거브레 말과 원보 마상 발라서보다 강아치네 디게 최지야 냠네 거브레 말과 대한 지금 데네기 인자 데솔야 디 용야게 마야게 다 튕게 야고 용야다 원보 상황 없어도 받아 지지대 템바야 된다라 진바다 수준 수비 가서 세바다 냠네지야 데네기 최려야 안 냠네지게 되녀기 뛴바 안지기 야고 용야래야 마음발에 예바데 전주 냠네지야 안데네 안지기 게 데네기 야고지에 고급게 야고체라 몰람 냠네지야 지산 딩이디 다 디레다 기부 중에 가서 냠네지에 군로데라 지진 치마더니 군로네지 다 지진치마 대위에 탑대에 게 유단디가 되어야돼 지금 수준 예주된 수준 하는 세배 전된 전주 되네 내가 소래 몰람디만 참자와세야 돼 단념내제 디차고래 다보 다케와 치마 되니 군론 게야 내가 저 다디케고 추는 투모와 람이르 바시고와 제자당아 나중에 잡아치면 최전 냠는 제바이네 단 다데도 오스데 깨와치만 안송을 깨바이네다 제제 고브라가 말해 제자 대사 깨와치 무티시야 아니 원데 고바 토구구도 제자 땡데래 냠는 제 고브라야 된다 냠는 제 원데 고바 토구구도 선비게 단 토구비 줌센디게 되네 상다제다 원데 고바 된 유튜브에 올라와다 깨와치만 원데 고바 토구비 줌내가래라네 그래서 원도고 와마토베는 가서 깨바는 최지야 고거라고 말해. 전 점이 조금 대받침에 주인지에 고거라고 말봐. 최지님네 제 고거라고 말해. 진짜 되네 인자다 김대지. 디인장은 원도고 토고. 당 원도고 토게 되게 듬바기에. 되게 듬바기에 어디 딘 토비하게 규딜에 배주지. 딘이들이다.
So staying with the same point. So one generates a wish, firstly, to attain excellent rebirths. And then one, that's the first outline, generating an attitude for concern for future lives. So this is where one generates a concern, rather the striving for future good rebirths. And then how to do so, relying on the methods for gaining happiness in future lives. So these are where one cultivates the causes to bring about the result of good rebirths. And those causes are principally ethical restraint, which is the cause that leads to rebirth in the higher realms as a human or God. But in addition, one needs further causes such as generosity to ensure that one is not impoverished whilst as a human, but has material abundance. Furthermore, one needs to cultivate patience so that one's sense faculties are complete and one has harmonious relations with others. So this is further required, as is joyous perseverance. That's a fourth cause, to have for the virtue to have great strength, and in future lives then, for one to have an aptitude for virtue. And then finally, or fifthly, that of prayer. So these are the five causes. So in these two outlines, relying on the methods for gaining happiness in future lives, that is what is being referred to: ethical restraint, generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, and prayer. Then the motivation of the practitioner of initial capacity is what's referred to in that first point, generating an attitude of concern for future lives. But because we are approaching this as trainings which are shared with a practitioner of initial capacity, the motivation we are encouraged to develop is broader. It will contain the motivation of a practitioner of initial capacity, in that we will be engaging in the cultivation of the causes of ethics and generosity and so forth in order to have good rebirths. But there will be a larger, overarching motivation that needs to be cultivated. And that is the motivation of wanting to engage in the Mahayana so that one can become a bodhisattva and lead all beings to enlightenment. So therefore, the motivation that one generates is not merely the motivation of a practitioner of initial capacity, but that motivation is contained within the greater or the actual motivation the primary motivation, which is that of the Mahayana, of wanting to enter the Mahayana, but knowing that in order to actually do so, to eventually attain that goal, one needs to ensure one has good rebirth after good rebirth. So therefore, the motivation is one of the Mahayana, but it contains within it the determination to achieve, cultivate the causes for good rebirths.
that yewu chungu ge tumo lamni ba lo chang se di da gomya di re da di ni ma do ma da di gewa chima on tu ka sa da gewa chima nga zu ka so re chang shu sem jam ni ji thaba chim chue nyam ni je ba la tin khaba chen to go du xian li ya pen ba zhu ya la ya tin khaba chen mon jo go ma to ban da xian la pan do ji du sa ma tin ze da gewa chima ni nga so le du nga la ta jong wo su go mon jo go ba to go du san be ge de ni ge 당원이 고바 토고 돈이 두께 와서다 원이 고 토비 제도에 룡의 승예주 예주 dom제 디바 자데 도시 제스 바 dom기 있으면 dom이 게야다 되네 안에 소수기 집에 냠내지야 되네 누수배 냠내지야 되네 전주에 냠내지야 모두 신은 야 지게 개와 침만음 소야다 등이 되네게 개비신의 생이들 마트에 되네 타바침 비게 취념내지 고합되네게 라지 용어 쇼세 비게 되네 안에 지게 몰람 제들이 나디 냠는 제들 디르다 기워 중요 투모알라 미리 뭐 로장 냠는 제들 또 고미야 디차고로 와.
So to present then briefly how a practitioner engages in the trainings shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. When it cultivates a motivation of the Mahayana, I want to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. To do so, I have to engage in the Mahayana itself. To do that, I need to ensure that life after life I have excellent rebirths. To bring that about, so there's the motivation. To bring that about, I'm now going to engage in the cultivating the causes. So one meditates on ethics, the need to abandon non-virtue, engage with physically and verbally, as well as engage in meditations on generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, and making prayers. So in brief, that is the practice that someone engages in at this level, in the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity. It's the motivation of the Mahayana, which will incorporate their actual level. And therefore needs to ensure I gain good rebirths, and then one engages in those meditations of ethics and so forth.
지딘 치마 되니 얘기와 치면 원료 고반 토구도 선배 되니 삼바시 기고로 와다 디네 기고반자 될야 당보 될라 니세 지딘 디르도 미네바 치와 제소 점바 삼바 엔 지딘 치마 지들 유와라 지들 유와 로니기 디도 삼바 오스.
They're moving down, generating an attitude of concern for future lives. So this now, we're going into the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity. We saw it has two parts. The first is to develop the determination to want good rebirths, and later will be the causes and how to do so. So generating an attitude of concern for future lives, this has 2 points. The contemplation, recollecting death, and that one will not remain in this life for long. And secondly, the contemplation of what will happen in future lives in terms of the happiness and suffering of the two types of persons.
로케기 된다라 딩이 삼당고 그래지 제자다 딩이 삼당을 딕시어가 배김 송고가 지금 전체 가서네 아저리아 지린 치마 되니 요로케 후어레스 디가르신이 기고 말씀하고 디순에서 하 먹어진 아니 기고 말와 디수 삼단에서 약화하거나 되는 지원 치마 되니 요로도 코로랑슈기 기용 거리 기기리에서 왔다 코로랑슈기 저 딩이 삼단도 다른 때가 지금은 삼벨이 기기로 와다 지난달에 타고 선배 지고로 와다. 지사다 딩이셔데 지딘 딜 링도 미네바 chiwa chisu jamya samdaya deda jidin chima drivige da roani sede nga so de desugi dunga samdaya dige denige samdaya du di 땅고 be 김생에서 탑람지 딩이 di 땅 발에 때네 안에 가르치 것은 지딘 치마 원dio 고반 돈이 좀 발로리 끼 두고 와 디기에게 된다라 딩이 됐고 냠내지 삼땅고래 제바제고래 해서다.
So as the translator mentioned a couple of times, that this word translated as concern is a little soft. It's usually translated as yearning for, striving for. It's a much stronger word. So how does one develop this kind of strength of mind? It's through the meditations mentioned here, these 2 points. So it's through the contemplation, recollecting death, and that one will not remain in this life long. That's the first. And then building on top of that, the contemplation of what will happen in future lives in terms of the happiness and suffering of the 2 types of persons. These are the 2 broad meditations which one cultivates so as to bring a deep strength of mind, a determination to attain excellent rebirths in lives to come, not to fall into the lower realms. So these are the 2 broad meditations, there are many subpoints, to cultivate so as to bring this focus, strength of mind.
지딘지 린도 미네바 아니 치와치 수템바 삼단하리다 다간스 당고르슨 당보들라 삼도신 삼단하라 마소나 림바 시시고로와 치와템바 마곰비 예믹 삼단하체 네 곰비 편연 삼단하체 네 치와템비로 지다보시 끼에세 간스 끼사기 끼바시 네 치와템바 곰비기 술로서 곰나 치와템바 곰나디네 곰고레세.
Then drilling deeper further. So looking now at the first meditation that is part of cultivating the attitude where one is striving for excellent rebirths. This has 4 points: a contemplation, recollecting death, and that one will not remain in this life for long. This has 4 points. So here we come to the meditation of the impermanence of this life. The first point, the fault of not cultivating mindfulness of death. The second, the benefits of cultivating mindfulness of death. And thirdly, what kind of mindfulness of death should be generated. And then the actual meditation itself, how to cultivate mindfulness of death.
나줄래 경가르라고 하스네 개와 치마 되니게 삼로 야보기 마투고 두고 마디 예미레 경을 해서다. 그래서 당한줄래 개와 치마다 먼저 고만 토고도 선배 되니게 삼바 야보기 마투바디 마투바네 이니게 요르데 나줄래 게 요르데 이나한줄래 기고 말와. 그래서 진한줄래 라야 여바지 말아바네 경으로 와. 로와 칼라심부사야 여바지 여데베지 맞아바네 경으로 와. 디나진다 가서 잘라야 오지우지 라야 여바질라 만줄래 레마토바네 용어와 디나시 나줄래 개와 치마 하던 건데 뭐 토구도 선배 돈이 삼바딩 한줄래 개 여러 배선 개 여러와 지선 디가 저기 개 마토바레 개 마토는 한줄래 용어라 요아레스 저는 디교 마토바디 가르치네 개 두고 말라나 지선 아주 치와서야 돼 곰베기 치와 마덴바레스 치와 마덴바자 치와 잼바다 마공바자 디기 경을 했어. 디디네 경을하고. 제가 치와디 마잼바제 치와디 마공바인자 근데 나줄이야 치와 개와 치마 되니게 삼로디 나줄래 라여바데 라마도바데 끼마도바데 끼 경디리 해서다. 경세데. 예바세데 예믹세데 경식으로 와다.
The first outline, the fault of not cultivating mindfulness of death. So this immediately then points to the reason why we have not yet cultivated a yearning, a determination to cultivate the Dharma within, in particular to ensure that we do not, or explicitly, to ensure that we don't fall into the low realms. But it's it's this lack of awareness of our death that has led to our mind that wants to engage in the Dharma being weak, being wishy-washy, not being strong and focused. It's this lack of a cultivation of awareness of death that whatever aspiration we have, it comes and goes, but it's not dominant. We haven't yet really recognized just what we can achieve in this life. It's like having delicious food just in front of you, seeing it, but not thinking to take it. We have the capacity to radically transform our stream of lives, but because of not being mindful of death, our aspiration remains weak and flimsy.
치와 공부 삼다와이나 되네 니기 대보들라 갈리고서 깨와치면 온도고 토고도 선비 donye리 삼바데 기고래 제래 제가 치와 공부게 치와 공부하는 파여요래스.
Continuing to look at these 4 points. The first, the fault of not cultivating mindfulness of death. That is, in brief, one's mind stays weak, unfocused, not determined. Then the second outline, the benefits of cultivating mindfulness of death, is in brief, that determination and strength of mind that we currently lack, this will arise, and it will arise in a powerful, transformative manner, opening the door to the Dharma for us.
다디니 자다 치와 템바디 치와 세디 코jen고리 곰고리 디마곰바나 용라게레스 용가레여스네 개와치몽 온디오고 반더니 유튜브에서 기투고 말이에시. 네 다 치와 세디 파트 시루다 데게디 싱해봐요 말선 시바디 곰바 있나 삼다와 있나 엠페요레스 카메 페요가르여스네 시와디 곰바 하고 디네 곰바 있나 디기 나 오다 개와치만 원도고 반 되냐기 dum바디 끼기레스 제자디 dum바기나 디귤라고로 차산티 유디시산 레용고 제자 디파에 용고레스 다가지 치워 마덴바나 뉴경고레스 노트리 공경고라고레스 치워 곰바이나 페요레 디제부 루그레스 송거로다 딩이디게.
In brief, the faults and benefits of not engaging or engaging in this meditation. Not engaging, one continues to follow one's impulses towards the Dharma, but without striving to cultivate the Dharma in one's mind. But the benefits are, a deep determination arises that I need to act within the confines of ethics and so forth. I need to cultivate the Dharma within so as to achieve the results. The whole pathways or the whole Dharma opens up to one when one gives rise to determination to make use of what remains of this life. So that in brief is the faults of not engaging in this meditation and the benefits of doing so.
체로시 간에스디 기고래 사지 다 로기 체로시 숨 간에스에 사지시고래 숨바다 치와 템별로 지다보시 깨봐서 로 간에스에 기고래 되니시 기고래 간에스 기고래 사.
The third outline, what kind of mindfulness of death should be generated?
다디네 자 다디지 치와 마덴바이나 아니 용요래체 치와 템바이나 펜요래체 네 치와 안다 치와 템별로디 간에스에 시데 데니시 구구레 세시데 다 만주게 디르와다 오다 치와 템별로서 다 지게 소수 니메치 시루구레 게디시 녜바요 말에 셈베 삼로 들어와다 가지 같이 시에네 타 쳐버래 다 게디시 녜바 메 맞잖아 다 상이 치그래 나니 치그래 대시 공다디와 치그 게티싱 해봐 땐데 요마래 선배다 디레다 삼로디 치와지비 로지다 보셔야지 땐데 시에는 다 쳐버려 시에는 다 쳐버려 때 게티 시그래서는 내가 잡아기는 요마다스 지진의 상이 시그래 지진 디린 시도 그래 지진 공다디와 시그래 다디 지진 다디 주지 까마카시 제일 시로 땐데 기네 요마래 선배 디 삼로디다 땐데 로려 야고치게 되다 치와지비 로셔야 디시고래 시에 내가 다 쳐버려 게티시 내가 매아 선배 삼로지다 somebody chiwa tembe lo sida bo se de chiwa tembe lo kan de chi la ki ore se de ki ge chiwa tembe lo di re so da lo di xie ge ta che ba de xie de den den ta xie ta che ba de sa ta che ba ji da da xie de ta che ba ne ge di xi ge de di xie ge nge ba den den yo ma de da ji jin de di ren xi ji zan san yi ji de lo ha xi ji xi ge de ji jin de kan ma ha xi 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 den den gi ne yo ma de se be da chiwa den den xi ge de xie le nge ba den di zi ba de de ge se be ge 땡케 가요 말에 세비 삼다이들이다. 이때 치와 tempe lo 지다 보시기 해서 되니시 로 되니시 끼고 그래서 그러다.
Look in these three outlines. We see the first is we reflect on the faults of not meditating on the impermanence of this life, so as to turn away from not having done so and embrace the benefits of meditating on the permanence of this life. So those are the first two outlines. Then, what kind of mind can we expect to generate when we have engaged in the actual cultivation, the fourth one? So the third outline is what kind of mind we can expect to give rise through engaging in the steps, the fourth one. So what kind of mindfulness of death should be generated? It has these two components of certainty and uncertainty. A certainty in, I will die. My death is definite. This isn't just merely theoretical, something that befalls everyone. It is going to befall me. And then the second component, but when this happens, is uncertain. It could be today. It could be this afternoon. It is completely uncertain when it will come. So the what kind of mindfulness of death should be generated is these two components of certainty and uncertainty. Certainty in terms of I am going to die, but it is uncertain when.
데네기다 디로 데니께 이렇게 된다라다 다 삼나타 아카니스탄 거라스는 시베 채워래 치와 젬바 곰비 수유시데 다리 로티 냐바 시그레 그티치 냐바 요마레 세베 삼도 야고시게 된다라 아니 가라 삼당으로선 다 치와 젬바 곰타디 삼도 데니스네 땅 거라서 곰나시고 송거래.
There's mind at the third outline. What kind of mindfulness of death should be generated? So this is the certainty I will die and the uncertainty as to when, and this is cultivated through the final outline, how to cultivate mindfulness of death. That's where the steps of the meditation are.
제사당은 저 데네르와다. 근데 시기를 게디싱 해봐 요마레 선배 삼는 나에도 단 삼는 이바들라 할리게선 근데 신의 매번 차고 막 어두그래라도 되게는 야는 안 손을 끼고 야는 된을 끼고 그래서 대다 니리 형으로 와다. 제사다 난 손을 끼고 나다 난 손을 강아 되네야 될 끼고 말 사실 될 존데 끼고 말해야지. 난 가오로선 될때 된을 야끼는 끼고 요래서 제사 담가치 담가지고로 결혼 미시 시고 그래. 신나 아니 개마들 양자 용서 줘서들 사실 니요래서 야는 난 손을 줘야 안 된을 줘 그래서 나선 로안에 강아 된데 요 될야는 튕긴 된데 요래서 다 된들 개는 될 튕겨야 돼 상황 야 요래서 진짜 띵이데 담가지고 진짜 담가지도 엉아대 두고 있어야 돼 언제 고방 두고 있어 제상 언제 고방 두고 있으면 다이도 다른 건데 줘 있는데 저런 건데 줘알이야 결혼이 데리체 그래서 가르치 요래서는 수름 송고래 집에 냠내 지고래 세배 냠내 지고래 준대 지고래 몰람 잡고 그래서 dondadirida.
This reflection on the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the time of death, this leads to the obvious question: what happens when death comes? what happens to my consciousness? Where does it go? And the reality is there are only one of two directions. We either fall into the suffering of the lower realms, or we remain where we are in the higher realms. There's only one of two directions, and of the two, it's very clear which is preferred. So the great purpose of the meditation is it leads us to recognize that we are at a crossroads. We can either continue as we are now, hoping for the best, or we can take control of our future and cultivate the required causes that will ensure further good rebirths, rather than merely hoping for the best. So this meditation on death and impermanence leads us to the determination, I need to take control of my own situation. I can't just hope for the best, but I need to cultivate the causes that will influence the outcome.
당은 지구를 와변을 하는 중에 지게 롬바 카셸야 출로게 강아시고 지유도 인연의 흉기 년다던 거 어켜나 뒤보고 그래서 대돼야 말도 디니실라 조고래 자식으로 되니게 조고래 선배 삼로지 해봐 있나 이제는 레레 되셔봐네 기딜레저서에 레 하고야 말아 지산 조고래 선배 좀 지도다 지산 출로지 리그레스 딕스펜 사이엄 침보시 리그레스 디 뒤수 게딜레 하고야 말아 다버직 나올래 다버직 디 나올래야 뒤수 게딜레게 하고야 말아 니미직 레 타쳐버려 사실 임바다 지산 디 말레니엘야 된 조고래서 지산 레 타쳐버려서 하고 봐는다 조고래서 다 조바는 and such a bit of Sungur Yagarushi, Deladrone Yagara did in the Gangache, says. Just such a Damgani Yovane, and the Yagadil drag Tupshigro, doing Devakigua. The Yagadil drag Devaki, Yagadil dradilia, then Modal Masona, Kanekan Joe, Namdu Joe, the Modal Caris Joe, the Talam, the Bishop Sigurova. Just a di draw goading about the draw go about the Haukovache. Then Drosa the Haukovache. Then that Drosa wasn't. 조사기 델려 조해기 튕긴 가르가고 요바지 데리제래다 디 데리제 사소나 제네 데네 강아 균에 메로 와데 고 조조지로 와게 되는 어떤 디 강아디 말랭일 마트엔로 딘마 베시다 조시로 디나 신앙 중에 시엔에 타셔버래 게디 신에서 요 말다 시도 제자다 시엔 타셔버래 근데 돼요 말데 조고로 와데 다 조나 가와 조서 야네 개와 치만 안손 조고래 야네 덴절 조고래스 딩이디다 야도시네 덴롤네 야가요서 지기와요라 안퉁에사요 강아충아요라 만들어봐나 뇌가 퉁에 꾼바 강아차와 안지 질레갈마서 마요라 사지시요도 저는 가르치스는 소소 야가들 되어지기로 와지다다 가는 덴롤 기고도 원료고 공고도 지자다 디제고나 결혼 디도엘란 결혼 탑람 디디지 제고라세도 되네 안진바다 주셔서 전에 삼대 가서 전주단 말람 디수냠네 제대 제자 두신의 제대 제자 되내기 시에게 삼로시 템바이나 은치와 개와치마 되게 듬바기 되네 듬바기 어디 개와치마 개에게 델레야 개에게 탑람 규디 베즈제 한데 다디 탑람 규디 되네 듬바기 델레 개에게 탑람 규디 베즈제 아주 데리체베네 되네 게디 시나에 개와카야 말로다 미산이 시나레 로제마 롱아두기 제레 시베네데 개와카야 말고 가스는 야게 야사들 내용으로 와 어디지자 데나디로 진짜 치마 되니 삼바기 치마 되니 삼바기는 치마 유하게 탑람 냠술린 거래 해서지 지사다 치마 되니 삼바기 와라 치와 전국에 조고바디 강가 연구여바다 하고 치와 전바고 전국에 마전바는 안디야 경험하게 그래서 전바이나 안디데 조야기 탑람디게 파 안디게 데리체한데 안캡스 경험이 되고 두고래서 전국에서 지사다 대야기 치고게 삼로디 가래라나 지사다 내버리 시그리 텐데 시그리 사자 게디시 내버 요 말에 선배 삼로디 이 로야 약고시게 디레서 왔다서 디기에 된다라다 치와디기 파 안삼당을 치와디 공부를 해서 간에 치기래 간시 치위 긴가려래 강가 간에나 인치를 되는게 삼다야 들어와다 치와 점배 주스 치와 점바 공배 주스
Present this through a couple of analogies. If someone is living in an area where earthquakes are possible, generally warning cannot be given. So if a powerful earthquake befalls those people, a lot of life is likely to be lost. Whereas those who live in an area where floods are possible, there generally warnings can be given. So of those two circumstances, it's very clear which would be preferable, to be forewarned or not. So if you imagine you're in a place where, and you receive a warning from the government that a powerful flood is coming and you must evacuate, then one, having been forewarned, one will do so. And moreover, the government hopefully will be responsible and they will identify or advise which routes to take. People living in this community to take that road, in that community to take another road, or they'll be lay on buses or helicopters to get everyone out. Then all you need to do is follow the method that the government presents, and you can be safely evacuated. You can quickly escape with minimal loss of life. So these two emergency situations are handled very differently. The one, no forewarning can be given, and the loss of life will be great. The second, forewarning can be given, and with advice well followed, then loss of life is minimized. It's very clear which of these two techniques, or which of these two situations is preferable. And what we will be guided through here is similar to being forewarned about one's impending demise, in that through these meditations, one comes to recognize that my death truly is certain, that this illusion of time is nothing more than that. Because not only is my death certain, but the time of my death is completely uncertain. I cannot say with any certainty whether I will die tomorrow or even today. So with that recognition, we are forewarned. Moreover, we come to recognize that our next rebirth can only be in one of two directions. And the arrogance that assumes I will not be born in the lower realms, this too has no realistic basis. But there is a method, cultivation of ethics, generosity, and so forth, and thereby applying myself to those in a focused, concentrated way, the desired destination of excellent rebirths will be achieved. So these chapters that lie before us, or what we're just starting here, is this process of shaking us up from our illusion of believing that we have time, and this belief that what lies ahead of us will be at least as good as we have now. And if we embrace these teachings and apply them ourselves to them, cultivate them within, when the certainty of death does arrive, it will not befall us. We will embrace it. We will die free of fear, free of regret. In fact, we may well welcome our death, welcome this change of body. That is the outcome of this training. And then the fourth step, the fourth outline, how to cultivate mindfulness of death. These are the steps by which one trains to recognize firstly the certainty of one's death, and then secondly the uncertainty of the time of death.
Bola ngale so that the dango di chiwa tembe ke nyimik sam da de or chiwa ma tembe ke nyimik sam da de da nganzu ya da jigo nganzu samno na la kariyo ba de nganzu le ngotwe chi go dango nganzu na la samno kariyo sen dini su yo re si go dango sa ne da sue tar chiwa shi hong nyamba kun la ye jang Nima Rere Shing, Diring Michi, Diringa Michi, Nyamdo, Lue, Anzo Luege, Michi, Cho, Zimba, and Chiwa, Chida, because Chiwa Madimbi, Jungo, Madimba, Kaza, Chiwa, and Chingedi Gada, Chiwa Maon Sunjit, Jitenish Yores, Maon Sunjil, Jungo says. As Ganjela Dandala, Anzo, some carriers, and then Jidang, Shigres, and some of Yores, or that's Chiwa, Yabukula, Yang, Nima Rere, she, Diria Michi, Namdo, Michi, Cho, Zimba, and Denigi, some of the Yungu, Mashitun in the Yores.
Now let's come to look at those 4 points in this actual meditation. So the very first, the fault of not cultivating mindfulness of death. Although we all have the thought that at the end of our life will come our death, each day we think, I will not die today, and today I will not die. In this way, right up to when we are about to die, our mind holds on to the idea that we are not going to die. So this is a very clear reflection of the illusion that all beings live under. Every human accepts that death will come. People don't live with the delusion that they will never die. But people do not live with the understanding it actually may come today.
That is on the Chasala Namyo, the Sivura, Chazan, Tanimchi Shiro, and some of Yority in that some of the Nimiria, Shigimares, and other Jigge, or that the Konda Dice or Sani Dice, that the Lagamason Dieu, and Camjana Droga Dieu said, the nigger some of Chigoro, that the Ria Sani Shigimaras. And 9 cigarettes, 9 cheers, some drinking more than 9 in the Lojama, Low Mobile in Yang Chichi did it. Just also some like a cigarette, some bit I inducing Nimeri, Diria Michi, some during that, Shigimaras and be some of them, now, same Hangianala, Shigimaras and be some that Matiche, Tachel, Dichi. That's Sani the Nimas or that, there's Sani the Shigimaras and be some of the Nishi, Mungores, Michi. And that was a some non Michiege, Chigmaris and Chodi, some of the shook chair or getting a shook chair. That she gets and some of the chunchun about the legal Mares or Michigo. Jezada Machi Sunchela said, she wrote Chidi Cabin and never that she saw the Megana, she wrote Chivin, but I never the task on the digging, I got Curon to a young legging us until the younger one. Jezza didn't. That is Shiro Chevina and the new Mashiach, some Lorochi Cordigo, Eche, Denesing to some Nana, Diligo, Eche, Gedina, Shingmares and some of the Shukshibu or as
What's presented here is not going to be surprising to anyone. This is the illusion with which we live. Although we all have the thought that at the end of our life we will come out, so what's it trying to say is we all know that our death will come. Everyone accepts that we will die, but we don't have a recognition of certainty in relation to this. It is clear to all of us that we will die, but if we look at our lives, they're dominated with thoughts of, after the class, I need to do that, and then tomorrow I need to do that, and then they have a whole list of things to do tonight and tomorrow, and then the whole list of the things for next week, next month, next year, next decade. And this is how we've lived our entire life, with certainty that there is time. We know, yes, death will come, but we have this to-do list, and we think it will never come before that is completed. So we have all our short-term plans, our long-term plans, and this is because whilst we know we all die, no one expects it to be today, nor tomorrow, or even this year or decade. And this shows that we have not really accepted the certainty of our death. And it's really the difference between knowing a point of the Dharma, understanding a point of the Dharma, being able to explain a point of the Dharma, and realizing the point of the Dharma. Realizing it is when one's mind has been transformed by that knowing, that understanding. And we all know we'll die. We all understand we'll die, but we haven't realized we will die. So we live with this illusion that in this way, right up to when we are about to die, our mind holds on to the idea that we are not going to die. So even when one goes to see the doctor and the prognosis is not so good, we have some illness, we then hear the medical treatment, we follow it well, but we think we will heal. We generate hope, I will heal. And we think we will see the medical treatment through to the end. We think that this illness will not beat us. We don't have any understanding that something else may take our life even before the course of treatment is done. And if we are hospitalized, we have every hope that we will heal, and we have the expectation we will heal. And even if we are told that the prognosis is not good, that we cannot overcome this illness, we still believe today will not be my last. So right up to the end of this life, we live with of course I'll die, but we do not believe that it could be today.
다다티고 말해서 지나다 델리아 대산예 미신나예 메시 로치에 제마 마시 되네 삼다 되베네 마시 삼다들이 되네 아니 시에데 땡겨 말해 시에 줘야데 땡겨 말 줘야 마였나 줘야게 되지 지고 말해 지지도 말해 지래 지상 줘야 되지 맞아 진짜 되지 맞아 제마 줘렌지 아니 가야 캐면 봐 줘베네 디 강아래서 지상 당번에 10월 10 기디 신경에 요 말다 되네게 삼는 파 도르시다 안데 디 도초들이야 산이 마시 나이 마시 세디 파 도르시네 기디 신경에 말다 산 직제 산이 시그리 직제 나이 직제 다오 직제 마시로 기디 신경에 말았으면 삼다이도 제자다 기디 신경에 말했으면 삼다는 직제 다오 제마 시로를 쓰면 삼다이도 다오 제마 시로나 나는 겨 줘서데 된로 줘고 제가 된로에 유리 다들 싸우고 말다 다들 주도마도 아니가 제 다오지만 차는데 계산을 주타요 말은 다들 주기 있어. 제자데 되네게 되네 다와지마 시로부터 선배 삼당에도 코로나도 되네 다들네 먼저 겨와 치마게 만 가서 원dio 고반도 얘기 규리 다들네 배수 싸우고 했어. 싸우고 그랬어. 되네게 배수 시로를 했어. 되네 배수 시어도 되네 그지 다와지마 마시베네 캡사로 마시베네 양자도 망아도 쳐고 시베네 규사자 강아요 말봐다. 요라야 말도 둠되고 차기로 어두시네 제자디 희와 템바이나 마시니엘이야 제가 겨치면 원dio 고방 토예기 뉴 두비할이야 캬버치 보여래서 두부래서 규사기래서 규사바네 되네 이시네 그 강아요 말 마시베네 아니요 말 강아요 말 마시베네 강아야야로 와도는 뒤로 와 되는 디가래 유망아사도 그러와
Lama Tsongkhapa is pointing out to us is nothing unknown to us, but he's pointing directly at our misconceptions, identifying them clearly for us. And this way of thinking that deludes us so is not in accordance with the Dharma. The very purpose of the Dharma is to help us develop our wisdom, our understanding of reality. And this is trying to, right from the outset of our training, shake us from our ignorance and bring us more into accordance with how things really are. Death is certain. And the fact that death is certain, that in itself is not the problem. The problem is our lack of preparation therefore. A lack of preparation for our death, that is the problem. Because when our death comes, what will determine our next rebirth are the qualities of imprint on our continuum. And in this and lives previous to this, we've accumulated extensive non-virtue. And should that be the dominant imprint that ripens at the time of death, we will fall to the lower realms. This we need to recognize. And that point of the final exhalation of this life, there is no valid reason we can point to that it will not be today. So when one recognizes this, it shakes us loose from the complacency of thinking, I have time. Then we recognize that from right this moment, I need to take care of my mind, ensure it's focused on virtue, and not just in a wishy-washy, comfortable way, but a deep focus. Just like if our life were in danger, we'd be very focused. Just like that, I ensure I cultivate the causes for good rebirths, ethics in particular, generosity, patience, and so forth. And then, if death does not come, then we have the next day, but with understanding that today may be my last. I really cannot say with certainty that I'll even see to the end of this particular session. Therefore, I will make the most of this particular session. And in this way, each period of our day, as we break it up, we utilize well, keeping our mind virtuous, cultivating a generous spirit, being patient in the face of adversity and so forth, and doing so with a focused, determined mind. And then if it turns out that whilst we are living with the understanding of the certainty of our death, we have years, it turns out we have years, those final years we would have used incredibly well, with a mind focused on the Dharma, not drawn to things of no importance. So this means our opportunity to practice is radically transformed. Every moment of how we live becomes a mind focused on the Dharma, not distracted by things of no meaning.
Jamal Kyore, Yanga, Chesa, di some of the Padorche, di Docho de Lea, and then Chiwa Neva, and them Chingeva, Name some down, and dear Anikich, Sosaki, Diponki to count to the Shawore, said to anybody, this Sungore, says that in them, Ajik, Asani Chigren, I get teaching ever Yomara, some China, Chesatanga, or that Lojema, Dawjema Legalea, Chichi said, Chichi, the other Cheshitimi, Gaio Mare, the kitchen ever, the Chech Negaja or somewhere, the Nigga Corsigra, Dimare. Okay, teaching never Yomarina, and Jehovah that Cheshi did in the Digor, in a good. Is it Mashiba, Jeshu Jade, Chinane got Gayamar wasn't big. That's the Anjig, some Nala, or Gedishing never made some time, Gedishing ever Yomarson to dinner, and Jiggy, Gemma, Shall Roger, the Lojema, Robert Chicken said, the Lojema Divangi. Chiki Duachi Levache, the chicken said, at that chicken that you show the magician, dinner, Eli Mashiba Derson and chicken Lagadim, John watch that did to go, so the dinner sometime made. So then Gizi Chim, Chiwadi, she cheating about your money, some time be done, D. Tembe Tone, Geju Ruadi, Gachimborka, Gang to that, as a Geju to Tuyadi, they won't get to say the Gachibor child. Gemma Nagic, Susuke Jehoda got Chibu, Cheshidina, Jigoredi. And Gedichin Namjing Emere, some Daji, Chejimatin by Jigomar, and not to say.
By training in the way that Lama Tsongkhapa is presenting here for us, we recognize the faults of not thinking, not recognizing the certainty of our death. And this, when you relate to this skillfully, the result is a deep motivation to use whatever it is that remains of this life, to use it well. So therefore, reflecting in this way, whilst it may sound morbid, it leads to the mind becoming positive. It leads to a strength of mind arising. And then crucially, to the extent that one follows on the motivation that arises within yourself from doing these meditations, to the extent you follow on from that and ensure that your mind stays virtuous, your mind becomes happy, and a confidence in yourself develops as you see yourself becoming ever more engaged in cultivating the Dharma within, letting go of what's unimportant. Especially when one looks back and sees how so much of our life we have spent with an interest in cultivating the Dharma, a wish to be one of those remarkable practitioners with all these good qualities inside, but actually we know our potential hasn't been achieved. But now I am achieving it. And we can, whilst we'll look back and see, yes, there was a period where I was not fulfilling my potential, I am fulfilling it now. This again adds to one's confidence, one's strength of mind, one's joy. So I encourage you to meditate in this way, particularly to challenge this delusion of there being time, because it is that leaves us to procrastinate. It's that believes all the reasons that our mind creates for us of thinking, as soon as these tasks are done, as soon as these circumstances change, then it will all fall in place for me. In that way, we will waste these next 2 weeks. We will end up continuing to waste months, maybe even years, and then look back at this opportunity and see what we missed out on. So take these teachings, apply yourself to them, and the more that one does so, the easier it becomes, because one becomes habituated in this way of thinking. Then the path of spiritual development opens up quickly, and the qualities start to arise.
제한이 냠네 제한이라 근데 추림 냠네 류가이 신이 주된 추림 소야 류가이 원dio 고바 토비기 귤라 토비 치도 규데라 되는 예제된 추림 소야 진바 다된 원dio 고바 토체베데라 되는 된데라야 튕게야 보야 돼 진배 냠네 제라 다 수배 냠네 제야 전주 냠네 되는 몰람 제야데 냠네 제야데 디기부 충결람 이름바 로코미야데 냠네 제조 디레다.
In essence, what we've looked at is that when now at the starting point of engaging the trainings which are shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, one generates the envelope of a Mahayana motivation. Within that envelope, one has the motivation of, I have to ensure I achieve good rebirths so that I can achieve my overarching motivation of enlightenment for the sake of others. And to achieve these good rebirths, I need to apply myself from right now, because my time here is finite. And then, developing that determination, one engages in the trainings of ethics, generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, and prayer. So then we can conclude there for this weekend, but if you have questions, then please feel free to ask. Then thank you, and then we'll continue then from the same point here next week. There's a question.
I'm just interested in the delusion of I'm going to live forever. Because we all seem to have it. So is it something like why do we have it? Like it's not according to reality. Like every more sharing.
So why is it that we all believe that there is time, that whilst we accept that we will die, we believe we have that there is time ahead of us, years and decades. So why is it that we have this common delusion?
나서 검시들에 시주구에 심베게디 시에데 김전으로서 삼등거 말와 시의 김전들이야 마시의 김전 마 삼다지 시의 김전을 삼등거 말와 제가 되네 로 검시로 지되네 지외로 왔냐면 배나가서 dun도로 신네 되네 시주구에 심베 삼코는 고기 말에 그래서 견삼들이 마도 아주 시기 고기 말 아주 밀리네 시기에 심베 삼도도 커야도 공부를 와대 그래서 그 소수리가 돼 디가서 녀만에 되네 삼 검시로 숙천부 차선을 봐. 제가 시기에다 시기 견데데 여서 될 삼는 마당 와 인자 디 검시 숙천부 나와. 제가도 다른 하나 저기 두스네 하고는 삼단 시루레 근데 그지신 해봐요 말했을 때 해봐 매비 김제 삼다도 사염 잡나 숙천부는 시루로 와. 근데 지 출로 시부 직접나 되네 견진의 시루로 와. 룽수 첨부전에 신도들 전에 시루로 와. 이 뭐라다 손에 시루로 와. 안에 내내게도 지금 김제 마보상데 야다 게디시 땡땡 해봐 민도 와서 삼로 리거로 와. 그래서 도스 지진 아주 균에 삼단 거 말와데. 마다 완전 아주 검시디 리거 말. 제가 마시베 삼로데 게디나 쇼초 쇼한테 김제 디레다. 디고 삼로 마다 땡거 말와. 제가다 두시네 삼땅고 그래서 그러다. 디네 삼따베는 게디시 해봐 요 말에서 삼로 리거에서 그러다.
Really just comes down to a lack of familiarity with thinking about how easily death will come. It's just that lack of familiarity. And this lack of familiarity with thinking about how easily death will come is not just something unique to each individual in this life, but in our life previous to this and our life previous to that. We weren't thinking in this way because people, or rather beings, generally don't. So in our lives when we were not human, let's say we were animals, we were not thinking about this. So we didn't develop that habituation then, and we didn't develop it now in this human life. So this habituation of thinking that death may well come, and it could come for so many different reasons, this habituation is lacking. And it has been so for lifetimes. And that it only comes down to that. And therefore, to change it just means developing that habituation. Thinking how just through a slight change with the cells in my body, suddenly the reasons for severe illness comes, or a change in terms of outer conditions such as a bacteria or virus, and illness, perhaps death will come. The slight change that comes through eating the wrong thing, or an accident while driving, or walking upstairs and falling over. So easily it can come. And thinking about this in detail again and again, recognizing that even through outer conditions such as natural disaster, suddenly death can come. Then in this way, the habituations will come about. But the habituation is what has been, the development of the habituation, this has been lacking for lifetimes.
Geshe Thubten Rabten ha moga se she ne de ne da ga the ma yong gu wa me li yang zu Geshe de ni de ne she be ko le nu gi ba da ha moga na de ma she sha ba ne pa jo ne che ne de ne an ji ge ma ji bo so ya chung gu wa ha go ba ne Atisha ne ko le nu gi Atisha ne ko le nu gi ma re se be ha go na an ji le ga kha na ha go ba ne je na no zu shu ma wa no zu shu cha sa di ne da ma xin ba yin gi no zu shu go wa 제가 디디로 앞에 내가로 가르쳐다 노르셔야 돼. 디제는 내상 마신 버긴지 노르셔 그러와. 진짜 약고 신반에 노르셔 말. 디 나진 간주디 삼 먹어 된 간주기 되네게 삼마다 내상 하 먹어 긴지 만줄에 되네 삼디로. 제가 되네게 삼는 예수 차상 하고 봐네 노르셔야 돼. 용말와. 제가 디 하고 거야 돼 계치 모르겠어야지. 제가 디 마자 최로시 디能够往돌려.
Acquisition of wisdom really is indispensable, because the mistakes that being made comes about through ignorance, through not knowing. So especially when you think of young people, young children, young people, there's not lots that still unknown to them. So they make wrong decisions because they haven't gained much life experience, and therefore they make wrong decisions and have a lot of regret for the mistakes they keep making. When they get older, they get a little bit wiser, and they make less decisions. Now they make better decisions. So when we take that understanding and apply it now to the perspective of the Dharma, remembering where we fall into this. We are beginners. We are not yet practitioners, although a being who has attained the realizations of even the beginning of the paths. Then, of course, all of this that lies before us it involves our ignorance, our lack of knowing, a lack of wisdom, like very young children making mistakes again and again just through not knowing. Okay, then thank you.